Warning, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. Hello everybody and welcome to the Derek Ruby Show. I am your host, the previously mentioned Mr. Ruby, and this is Halloween month on the Derek Ruby Show. What better way to celebrate that than with a review of Friday the 13th, Part 2. So our movie starts off with Alice, the main protagonist of the previous movie, having a nightmare about the events of the previous movie. This goes on a little bit longer than I would like, but it's a good way to set up everything that's going to happen in this movie. However, if you didn't see the first one, well, that sucks for you because it's been completely spoiled right here. Then she gets up and has a phone call with her mother, and she goes and takes a shower. Then she gets another phone call, but nobody's there, and she hears a noise and goes up to the window, and we get a jump scare from a cat. Alice has a sense of relief, and she goes to open the fridge, and she sees Pamela's head, and this happens. That was the first kill from Jason Voorhees, the slasher with the highest body count in all of cinema, followed by a ridiculously long opening credit sequence. Then we see Jeff and Sandra pull up in their big truck, and they go to use the payphone, and they have an encounter with Crazy Ralph.
I told the others. They didn't believe me. You're all doomed. You're all doomed.
Of course, by modern standards, we would probably call him Crackhead Ralph. But somebody has their truck towed off, and they chase it down, and it turns out it's their prankster friend Ted. So they all go for a ride, and they come across a tree in the road, and when they get out to move it, Sandra finds a sign that says Camp Crystal Lake. And Ted says,
"This place is on the same lake as we're going to be."
Camp Blood?
Hey, isn't that
Let's get out of here. We're going to be late.
Can't we take a look?
No way.
What's the problem?
You want to hear about it, man. Believe me.
as we come up to the main camp, we get a butt shot to remind you that you're watching a Friday the 13th movie. And Scott shoots Terry in the ass with a slingshot to also remind you that it's the 1980s and there's no such thing as sexual harassment. So we have introductions to establish the victims, counselors in this movie. And our main protagonist Jenny pulls up in a piece of shit car. And the movie establishes that her and Paul are romantically involved. Then we move on to one of the most famous scenes in the entire franchise that establishes the lore that is Jason Voorhees.
But I'm going to give it to you straight about Jason. His body was never recovered from the lake after he drowned. Legend has it that Jason saw his mother beheaded that night, and he took his revenge. A revenge that he'll continue to seek if anyone ever enters his wilderness again. Jason's out there, thirsty for young blood.
Then the counselors are all playing a bunch of standard games. It's not quite strip Monopoly, but at least it establishes something. Then Jenny says she's going to sleep for the night. Paul sneaks up on her and they start kissing. And Crazy Ralph looks on, being a peeping Tom. But the neighborhood watch Jason Voorhees is not going to put up with that. I want you guys to see this again because I bet you didn't know that Jason had the ability to stretch his arms over a tree. Who knew Jason was a lot like Mr. Fantastic? Then all the counselors go hiking through the woods, and Terry's dog Muffin wanders right up to Jason. After that, Terry can't find the dog. So Jeff and Sandra go wander off to the old Crystal Lake, and they find what looks like to be a mutilated dog, and they're caught by Deputy Winslow. The officer has a talk with Paul, and he asks him this question.
You're not even going to reprimand him? No punishment? What kind of place is this?
Jenny,
Yes, Paul.
no seconds on dessert for Jeff and Sandra tonight.
Now that's justice for you. Then we get our first glimpse of Jason as he runs in front of the squad car, and Deputy Winslow gets out to chase him. He comes across Jason's shack, and he goes inside to investigate. And then this happens. Jenny, Paul, and a bunch of the other counselors go out, and they leave the others behind. Then Terry goes skinny dipping. I can't show it to you because of YouTube standards and practices. Then we get a flirtatious scene with Mark and Vicky and Sandra and Jeff. Scott steals Terry's clothes because, again, no sexual harassment, and he gets caught in a snare. Terry goes to get a knife to go help him, and then this happens. Terry comes back and she sees Scott, and then she gets killed off camera. After a lot of drinking, Jenny rambles on about Jason.
He must have seen the whole thing happen. He must have seen his mother get killed, and all just because she loved him. I mean, isn't that what her revenge was all about? Her sense of loss? Her rage at what she thought happened? Her love for him?
Sandra and Jeff go upstairs to fool around, and Vicky and Mark flirt, but she goes to leave to go freshen up. And when I say she went to go freshen up, I mean she went to go freshen up. Then she goes out to the car to get something, and it starts to rain. Mark hears a noise, and he thinks Vicky's outside, so he goes out there. And then we get one of the most iconic deaths in the entire movie. Then Jason grabs Ted's spear that he left in the hallway, and we get another one of the most iconic deaths in the entire movie. Jenny and Paul leave the bar, and Paul tells Ted to come straight back when the bar closes. Because Ted is drinking all night in the bar, even though it defies all logic and slashers, Ted survives the movie. So Vicky comes back looking for Mark, and she goes up into Jeff and Sandra's room, and this happens. Jenny and Paul come back and they find blood in Sandra and Jeff's room. The lights go out and then Jason attacks Paul. After he gets the better of Paul, he stands up and Jenny runs into the bathroom. She tries to sneak out the window, but this happens. She goes into the kitchen, but Jason puts his pitchfork through the door. Crazy Ralph's body comes out of the closet and she goes out the window. Then she goes to the piece of shit car that won't start. Jason puts his pitchfork through the top of the car, and this happens. There is a certain intensity throughout this chase. She kicks Jason in the balls, he tries to sneak attack her, then she goes and hides in another cabin. Jason looks around for her, but as he's about to leave, a rat goes up to her under the bed, and she pisses her pants. She thinks Jason's gone, and then this happens. Jenny fights back with a chainsaw, and knocks Jason out with a chair. She runs away again and ends up in Jason's shack. And the imagery in this shack with the bodies and Pamela's head on the table with the candles is one of the most iconic things you'll see in the entire franchise. She barricades the door and Jason's coming in after her, but she puts the sweater on and then this happens.
That's a good boy. Good Jason.
Jason catches on to her little trick and then him and Paul get into a fight. And then one of the most dramatic moments in the movie happens. So they pull his mask off and they both seem to be very disgusted. They travel back to the camp and they seem to be okay. Then they hear a noise by the door. And it turns out it's Muffin. And just when everything seems okay, well, I'm sure you can guess what happens. Then Jenny wakes up in an ambulance and she wants to know what happened to Paul. And that's how the movie ends, and I have a big problem with this because we never find out what happens to Paul or how she got away. After 12 movies, it's just never resolved. And that's Friday the 13th Part 2. So what do I think about it? It improves upon everything the original movie did. The counselors are more memorable. Jenny is written to be a better protagonist than Alice. The setting is much nicer. Packnack Lodge is very memorable. It has some of the most iconic scenes in the entire franchise. The lore of Jason being talked about around the campfire, Pamela's head surrounded by the candles, the death of Jeff and Sandra, as well as the death of Mark, are some of the most iconic kills in the entire franchise. This movie established a lot of what Jason was capable of, and it was a very interesting direction that the writers took. This would almost be a perfect slasher movie barring a few little things like Jason's stretchy arms, but my main complaint is the ending sucks. I'm sorry, having an open ending where the final showdown's not seen and we don't know what happened to one of the characters is really just kind of bullshit. So because of that, I can't in good conscience score it as a perfect slasher film. But I'm gonna give Friday the 13th Part 2 4.5 stars. So thank you guys for watching The Derek Ruby Show, and I hope you're enjoying our Halloween month. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and Instagram. And as always, have a good one. And I'll see you guys next time. Now that's a face only a mother could love.